Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Greg Capullo Day, so we're taking a look at X-Force issue number 17, cover dated December 1992, part 8 of the Executioner's Song. Not going through the individual issues of Executioner's Song. I don't own them all, and the only reason I have these ones is because of the Greg Capullo artwork, and that's what we're here for. Starting off with the cover, pretty just kind of generic 90s cool shot of two guys fighting. Well pulled off overall. I like kind of the effect of the rubble down here, and just a small stupid little detail, but the signature just being obscured by a rock here. Just anytime you can add that extra bit of overlap and layering to an image, it just works for me, and I like that stuff. And there's lots of it in this one here, right? Apocalypse's arm and face kind of being in the, what's most foreground other than the rubble. Comes next Strife's arm, right? And you can clearly see them, and they're very simple and effective, and visually, right, it reads really well. That's one thing about Greg Capullo. Right from the beginning, he was great at composition, and we see that here. I still feel like in this issue, we'll see a little bit of kind of growing pains as to kind of the style they're going for, and the Wildstorm, Rob Liefeld, in the wake of those guys leaving the books. They're still trying to keep that look to a certain extent consistent, so it looks a little bit awkward here and there with some of the hatching, but definitely the basic structure underneath is 100% solid, as is the foreshortening and like I said, the layering. And the cover, really good indication of most of what this issue is about. Strife and Apocalypse and conflict. We'll have a bit of sequences with Wolverine and Cable that are interesting. Cyclops and Jean Grey, and obviously I'll talk more about those when we get to them. So let's crack her open, have a look inside. A Tale of Time and Vengeance, brought to you by Fabian Niciezi. I read once in Wizard that's how you're supposed to pronounce it, so I'm sticking by that. Writer, Greg Capullo is the penciler, Harry Candelario is the inker, Chris Eliopoulos, the letterer. He's lettering a lot of books that I've been reviewing from this period in the early 90s, so man, real workhorse of that period. And Frenchie Buccellato is the colorist. So opening up with a splash page, obviously, and we've got the conflict from the cover reintroduced with Apocalypse and Strife. And that's about it. A little bit of framing device back here in the image with the tech. I'm going to talk more about it throughout the issue because there's some amazing stuff there, but already you can see the intricate kind of stuff he's thrown in there. That part of it, to me, at least on this page, seems a little bit more Jim Lee influence than Rob Liefeld, right? The more intricate background details. I think Jim Lee was probably doing more of that than Rob Liefeld was. But then when I get to this next page, then I get the whole kind of Rob Liefeld feel to it, right? Where you got to turn the book. Right, it's the vertical double page spread, and still though I think Greg Capullo pulls it off a bit better in the sense that he does the old thing that I like, where it's almost a double page splash with this image up here and this foot overlapping into or onto the next page in the next panel, but then he throws in those extra panels for some extra bit of storytelling, and it works really well. Nice use of negative space here, right? Good idea to just have the background thrown out. And again, the lack of backgrounds on these pages also to me is a little bit reminiscent of Rob Liefeld, but I don't mind it so much because Greg Capullo is really doing an awesome job here. The speed lines here, right, in this background to really drive home the impact of Apocalypse hitting that wall there really works well. Just the whole body language and positioning of Strife as well, everything kind of going in that direction. A little bit of Art Adams to this one. And the punch to the face, right, it's so strong that the speed lines from it go out of the panel, as do Apocalypse's chin and some of his blood. That's a nice little detail there. Needs to open it up just to make it, a little bit different from instead of having just that 3-panel kind of sequence here, opening it up to that same negative space. Good idea. And then one last kind of impactful punch with, again, I've talked about how good he is at framing, and just having the foot and the hand here, really drives home the point that he's being thrown pretty far off. Pretty good action sequence. Very 90s. Bird's eye view shot here. These are some of the composition here reminds me, these are some shots that are reminding me, I've mentioned before, Greg Capullo reminds me of John Romita Jr. in some of his compositions and how they work, so maybe a little bit of that here too as well. But everything, just the storytelling, I can see here, like looking at these pages, specifically these two, this whole sequence, I could see all of this. It probably helps because Strife has that big red cape, but I could see all of this, storytelling, angling, paneling being used in a Spawn book. You know, you could replace this guy by Spawn fighting someone else, and I'm starting to see a lot of the same stuff. The tilted angles here, and just the basic anatomy and layouts that he's using. He's just a very talented artist. And this is also, these are also, excuse me, some of the pages where I feel like the inking is really starting to come into its own. And still reminiscent of kind of the Wildstorm Rob Liefeld kind of hatching, but becoming something else slowly but surely. You know, in the moment here on Strife, all the hatching here is really well done and much more organic to a certain extent, except for maybe the gauntlets here that are more reminiscent of that metallic look. But I feel like here they're kind of moving away from that and getting some more organic lines in there. There's something about this panel here, once again, just this one specifically, the layering of it. I talked about the tech before, right? Using that to have a big element in the foreground. We're in the next room. Obviously, there's a wall, there's a doorway, kind of a double frame with the panel, right? All of that works really well. And just this image is so multi-layered and works so well, has so much depth. Just a weird thing here where Apocalypse, is he supposed to stretch or something? Is that what he's trying to get across here? Like, I feel like such a stretch, excuse the pun, of the anatomy from there to there has to be on purpose, right? Like that's part of Apocalypse's power set or something, because it's really off from where it was before and where it is after too. So just wondering what's happening there. Can he actually extend his limbs to, you know, shorten the reach when he wants to punch someone? Let me know in the comments. I have no idea. Just a great panel here too. Again, that tilted angle, speed lines, all works really well. He's pretty much solid at this point. It's like I've probably said it before, but now it's like the overall compositions and storytelling and layering is already all there. And you know, anytime you're getting some new Greg Capullo stuff, he's just really kind of either enhancing, changing, you know, ameliorating a little bit the aesthetic, or choosing a different aesthetic. But you know, the basic building blocks have been there for a long time. This whole page is very dynamic. Gets stabbed in the chest there. What a cool looking hilt too. Like all the detail he threw in there. That's not, like, this is something I don't feel like either Rob Liefeld or Jim Lee would do in this instance, right? I kind of regret now as a kid, you know, pretty much stopped reading all the X-Men books right when Executioner Song was starting up. And I missed a lot of cool art from Greg Capullo, from Jay Lee. Who else was involved? I think Joe Quesada, maybe. Larry Stroman, I'm not sure. But anyways, no, he's probably gone by then. But, you know, I really missed out on some cool art back when I was a kid because I was totally sold on Image, right? And I only got into Greg Capullo when he moved on to Spawn. And originally, I didn't like his stuff at all. But now I see where I went wrong. And all of this is just, again, great sequence here with Cable and Wolverine. This is, I feel like, you know, the 90s version of Wolverine anyways. I feel like Capullo's finally starting to get comfortable with it. Looks pretty good here. Funny little sequence here. I've talked about before how I really hate the fact that Wolverine and The Thing, for example, characters who used to smoke in comics can't anymore because of some sort of moral thing. Because comics are, you know, apparently marketed to kids, and I don't feel like today that even applies that much anymore anyways. So bring back Wolverine and The Thing smoking. That's what I say. Great. Just, man, anytime I see a good down shot, a bird's eye view, I gotta point it out. Really well done. And this is, again, we're starting to move away from the Jim Lee hatching. We've still got it to a certain extent here and there, but it's almost becoming, and I think I mentioned this before, kind of similar to what the Kubert brothers were doing, in also trying to incorporate those Jim Lee flourishes and that Wildstorm style of inking on the books, the X books that they were working on. It's almost like the look became something else because of that influence or that editorial edict that they draw in that way, and they just found a way to make it work and make it a little bit more organic, just because I think inherently they're just better draftsmen and artists than the Image guys, the original founding fathers. Not all of them, but, you know, say Todd McFarlane, for example. And here's another example I was talking about. This one blew me away when I turned to this page. All the tech that Greg Capullo's drawn here, really cool. You know, I've talked about the evolution of this. Kirby kind of started it, and then, you know, the 70s guys, John Byrne, Walt Simonson did a different version of it. And then, you know, eventually you get to the 90s where, you know, if you know how to look, you'll still see the Kirby. It's still in there. It's just become much more complex and detailed. It's just great. Like all of this, this line is definitely like Kirby-esque and a slight homage to Kirby in his kind of squiggly line. Interesting color choice here. Oh yeah, this is funny. I'll just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages dedicated to Dragon Quest. Wow. They sure had money to burn in 90s comics advertising back then. So the book, at least plot-wise, I'll talk a little bit about it. It's split into the different groups and that they've splintered into. So we just had a sequence with Wolverine, Bishop, and Cable. Now we're going to go back to X-Force. It is an X-Force book after all, right? But during Executioner Song, those lines kind of blurred, excuse me. It's kind of like each issue became, you know, just a crossover issue, and that same kind of plot idea happened pretty much through all those segments, I think, or at least most of them, right? Where, you know, each individual group is splintered and doing something different within the grander storyline, which makes sense, I guess. Probably hard to coordinate, though. Some more John Romita Jr.-ish kind of stuff up here. And this is another page where I see a lot of kinship in the art with what the Kubert brothers were doing on the X-Men titles at the time as well. More great tech here inside the X-Mansion, right? They're operating on Professor X, who's been infected by a virus. And this kind of silhouette fading off, very 90s, right? I feel like that's just, this whole image here just screams 90s. So some of the members of X-Force, like I said, I didn't follow the whole storyline, so I'm not quite sure why, but they've been imprisoned here. And I found out because, again, I stopped reading the comics. Richter and Sunspot, I think his name is, were not members of X-Force, right? They kind of quit at the end of New Mutants because Rob Liefeld just didn't want him in the book, or in the team at least, because Sunspot stayed in the book, right, for a while with Gideon. And as I read the dialogue, you know, he's been fooled by Gideon, he says, or double-crossed or something. So at this point, no longer with Gideon. I guess that's why he's back with his old New Mutants crew, or X-Force, right? So Siren is also imprisoned, I believe. Or is it Multiple Man? Who's imprisoned here? Yeah, it's okay. So it's mostly X-Force. Here we get a rundown of, there we go, the whole cast that's in there. Sunspot doesn't have his helmet on anymore for some reason. Not Sunspot, excuse me, Shatterstar. All great kind of, you know, angry headshots of each character. I like that. Very cool. I like the coloring here. I always love this kind of blue they use for dark spaces. Works really well. And just that magenta red kind of hue on Strife looks really good. Obviously the shadow work underneath really helps it. And a bit of foretelling of the fact that Strife, I think it turns, correct me if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments, because I'm just going off my kind of distant memory of what I heard about the storyline. Strife actually turns out to be the original, Cable is the clone. Am I wrong or right on that? Okay. I think so. And it turns out that he is the X-Baby, right? The baby that, I'm not sure, again, man, X-Men backstory and continuity. Cyclops and Jean Grey had a kid, but he had a disease, so they had to send him into the future. And apparently, for a long time, people thought Cable was that kid, but actually it might be Strife. Maybe that's what we find out in Executioner's Song. Anyways, we'll see. Anyone let me know in the comments. I don't mind spoilers. Love the use of this deep blue again, and just got to commend Greg Capullo again on the storytelling, on the draftsmanship, on all that stuff, but just a guy running. Like, just how good is that? Like, the movement is just perfect. People running, I don't know, guys, it's just, they're hard to draw. I often have to look at pictures and reference to do it, and never quite comes out exactly how I'd like it to, and just something like this I'm just amazed with. So fluid, right? The foreshortening is just not too exaggerated, just perfect. And that's why I say, like, I feel like Greg Capullo at this point, there's no more, you know, on Quasar I would point out little things I thought were still a bit amateur to a certain extent. None of that here anymore. And all throughout this issue, it really feels like the inking, you know, is changing. And now near the end of the book, we're getting much kind of more illustrative kind of hatching. I don't know how else to describe it. It's still hatching, but it's not quite West Coast anymore. It's a little more round and bubbly. And very kinetic and moving is what I'll keep saying. Like, the characters are so much more dynamic and not stiff. Greg Capullo just ripping it. And again, in the inking, it gets just not as fine lined as the typical Scott Williams stuff. It starts to get a bit thicker and bolder, which really works and helps to animate the figures and keep the movement going even more. And as Apocalypse kind of, you know, comes out from, basically, let's say it, he teleported. It's pretty much some Kirby aesthetics. You know, this is Darkseid coming out of a boom tube. Never really realized before, looking at him now, how much Apocalypse is kind of similar to Darkseid in a weird way. It just doesn't have the helmet. Everything else is proportions, his costume almost, the face is pretty much the same. At least when Greg Capullo's drawing him here. And of course, Archangel, not too happy to see Apocalypse showing up, as he's the one who turned him into, or gave him the cybernetic wings and the blue hue, turned him from, you know, actual bird wings to some sort of, well, who was supposed to be a horseman of the apocalypse, right? In that Walt Simonson storyline. Simonson? Some people say Simonson. Of course, not too happy to see Apocalypse, but Apocalypse unfortunately having to tell him that, well, you know, we're going to have to battle Strife together. That's basically how the issue ends here. And again, just this last panel here, I want to point out, see, this is one where I feel like maybe in the close-ups and stuff, it gets too much now back to the over-exaggerated kind of Rob Liefeld style hatching that I'm not such a fan of. And here all of a sudden, maybe because it's deadlines, the last panel seems just a little bit rougher when it comes to the inks, which I kind of like, but that again harkens back to me, what the Andy and Adam Kubert bros were doing over on their other X-Men titles they were drawing. All right, guys, there you go. That is my review of X-Force issue number 17. If you're still watching and you are subscribed, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for sticking around. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below, because it really helps the channel, helps us grow, and it helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. If you're interested in the comics that I make, Big Baby or STARCRASHER, contact me and I'll be more than happy to set you up with a couple of issues of those. So everyone out there, thank you so much for watching and have an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents STARCRASHER one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KINGCOMICS.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.